Hello there and welcome to another episode of Ringgit Sense. I'm your host, Azaria Tagaya. As always on Ringgit Sense, we talk about issues pertaining to finances and money management, and this week we touch on motor insurance. Now, if you own a car or motorbike, one of the things that you can't avoid paying for is motor insurance. Last year alone, the industry paid out 5.38 billion ringgit in claims, which is almost 14 million ringgit a day for property damages, body injuries, and also vehicle thefts. The huge cost is one of the reasons why the motor insurance tariff was liberalized last year. What that means is that each driver will be paying different insurance premiums depending on their risk factor set by the insurance companies. The higher your risk factor, the more insurance premium you would have to pay. Now, we spoke to Anthony Lee, the chairman of the General Insurance Association of Malaysia, or PM, to find out more about what are the risk factors taken into account and how does the insurance claim process work if you are unfortunate enough to meet with an accident. Okay, so Mr. Lee, first up with the liberalization of the motor tariff, what would this mean for motorists? I mean, who would pay more or less for their motor insurance?
So the good news is now it'll be a risk-based scenario. So people who have a higher risk factor pay more. People who have a lower risk factor pay less. Of course, there are many things that we use to calculate risk. So it will include age of driver, type of car, where they live, their past history, many different things. So it becomes a fairer system.
Okay. Does things like gender or the color of the car pay any factor into that?
So it can. It's up to each insurer how they want to do it. I would say to you that color of cars probably less likely, but there are different. It's up to each of us to decide which factors we feel is more important.
Okay. What about the driver's driving habits or their history?
Yeah, definitely very important. There's a no claims bonus thing at the moment, NCD, right? So if you have 5 years accident-free, you obviously automatically get a discount. So that's already in place and that is used. But going forward, there's a Kejara system. So people will be interested to see how can we use that to more fairly price. So of course, if you have a track record of causing accidents or being involved in accidents, it will affect your the price that you pay.
Okay. Can you give us some facts or studies that you can actually compare with other countries, maybe neighboring countries?
Sure. So if you take Singapore, for example, that's a very mature economy. So they are already considering many different factors apart from what we have in Malaysia. So it will be, again, where the car is parked, location, number of drivers. They even look at how often you use the car. They are already moving to usage-based insurance as models. So I think if you look at the technology that cars have, insurers there are already able to start taking into account some of that when they insure the car. So these cars that are semi-autonomous, I'm hearing that some of them are actually prepared to lower the premiums because they feel that the car has enhanced safety and it will actually stop itself in the event of a bad situation. So we can look forward to that as well in Malaysia. Of course, they have less motorbikes, so it's a slightly different environment.
Okay. Yeah. Now, tell us a little bit about what happens when you actually run into an accident. Now, most people know the basics that they have to do. They have to claim insurance, they have to make a report. But what's the actual SOP that someone has to go through?
What you actually need to do is ideally call your insurer. A lot of them have 24-hour helplines and they're toll-free as well. They will then make sure arrangements that someone will come to the scene. The car will be taken to the police station first for a report and then taken to the repairer for further works to be done. So that should all be nicely taken care of. The good news is that PIAM has a toll-free number, 15500. So if you can't remember your insurer's number, ring that number and automatically we will route you through to where you need to go.
Okay. How long does the claim process actually take? Okay. How long should it take?
Yeah. So we have a good system in place as well. So when the car is at the workshop, the way it works is with Bank Negara is mandated no more than 14 days. So this is an online system. So the estimate, also the police report, everything will go to the insurance company and we will look at it. So if it's a windscreen thing, can take a few hours. If it's a very more complicated accident, sometimes we have to do investigative work to see if there's internal damage to the car. So that's why the 14 days. But nothing should take more than 14 days. Then we will approve, or etc. And after that, of course, it depends on the repair time. Repair time will depend on availability of parts and the workshop itself, etc.
What about the claim process? Now, you mentioned about the 14 days. What
Yep.
actually happens in that amount of time? And what happens if it actually exceeds? Because you say it cannot exceed 14 days.
Shouldn't. That's the technically, we need to then come back and explain why it's taking more than 14 days. But that actually is very rare now. We don't actually get a lot of complaints, typically. I think the number is a lot less than people think. Of course, the uncertainty is always everyone's. 14 days is quite a long time in a sense, right? So people are worried about, hey, it seems to be taking long, I don't have my car. But like I said, a lot of the accidents are small things. So if you take, like I said, windscreen cover, in a few hours that can be assessed and approved. Right? So I think we are quite efficient.
Can you take us through two separate scenarios? Let's say the blame is actually on us in
Yep.
the accident, and vice versa.
Yeah, so that doesn't necessarily, it shouldn't affect you as a person having driven the car. It's just up to the insurance company will take that into account. We will go through the process with the police, etc. What it really does mean, though, is that when you come to obviously renew your insurance, if you were the one that was causing the accident, it is going to affect the price that you're going to pay.
Right now, we're going for a short break, and after the break, we'll be asking Anthony about some of the most commonly stolen cars in Malaysia and what happens if your car gets caught in a natural disaster. That and more when Ringgit Sense continues. Welcome back to Ringgit Sense. Now, before the break, we were speaking to the General Insurance Association of Malaysia, or PM, about how the industry will be using risk factors to decide your motor insurance premium. Now, in 2017, almost 15,300 vehicles were stolen. Although this was a 23% decline from 2016, it's still a high amount of vehicles stolen and is a cause for concern for the industry as it raises the insurance premium. So we asked Anthony Lee, the chairman of PM, this. Now, what were the most commonly stolen vehicles in Malaysia, and what happens to vehicles that are damaged in natural disasters? What about in cases where your car is actually stolen?
Yep.
How much would be repaid?
Yeah, so this is important actually, because you can decide when you take out your policy whether you have an agreed value or the normal process. So when you say agreed value, the price that you determine when you're insuring the car, you'll get that full amount back. Whereas if it's not, we will then do an estimation, and we use either ISMs or some statistics on the actual value of the car at the time, and that's the value that we will pay out to the insured.
Okay. What happens if eventually the car may be found?
Yeah, so if we have paid it already, paid you in full, the car belongs to the insurance company, and then the insurance company, usually we will dispose of it, sell it, etc. If we haven't paid out, then of course, again, we'll take the process to make sure there's nothing wrong with the car, assess it, etc., and then either get it repaired, or if it's perfectly fine, pass it back.
PM also provided us with the statistics of vehicles stolen last year and in 2016. The Proton Wira recorded the highest volume in terms of private car theft in 2017, with 654 units stolen. However, the number is a 31% decline from the previous year, where 951 units of the Wira were stolen. According to statistics released by the Federal Police Statistics and Anti-Car Theft Department in 2009, demand for spare parts in the black market is the main reason why thieves target so many local cars. Wira spare parts are also relatively expensive, making it a popular target for thieves. Next on the list of most frequently stolen cars in Malaysia is the Toyota Hilux, which recorded the highest numbers in terms of foreign-made vehicles, showing that demand for the Toyota pickup among thieves is stronger than ever. However, overall, all top 10 car models showed a reduction in numbers of vehicles stolen last year as compared to the year before. those numbers in terms of car model. What's more pertinent is the chart for the most frequently stolen vehicles. This list counts the number of thefts over the total number of that particular car model on the roads for theft frequency. Here, the highest ratio belongs to the Toyota Velfire, which saw 112 thefts relative to 83,041 units on the road. Besides the luxury MPV, 4x4 vehicles are also in demand. This, of course, includes the Hilux, along with the Mitsubishi Pajero and Ford Courier.
So police are now, working with us as an industry to see how can we work with the manufacturers to tell them, can they put in better security in those cars? They're too easy to steal. 4 seconds.
What's the main reason that these cars are most often stolen? Is it the lack of security in the car or the parts? What?
So, yeah, they are stolen for parts typically. So they will cannibalize the car and then resell the parts. Some, like Hilux, is very popular to be taken up north. So they are, people actually pay them, 14,000 ringgit to steal the car. So it's an industry, unfortunately. But we are working on this. We have a fraud intelligence system started to roll out, and we're working with the police, like I say. So we actually see the number coming down every year, but we don't want, any cars stolen.
Okay. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about natural disasters.
Yeah.
What happens if, let's say, there's a flood and it actually affects you? How can someone claim for insurance in these cases?
So it's very important that you take special perils cover. That a lot of people don't take. That's an extra add-on. I think now, after you've seen all these floods in Penang, etc., everywhere, I think less than 5% of people in Malaysia take on special peril cover. Now, with the liberalization, more and more insurance companies are offering that together as a package. So I would say, if you are in a flood-prone area or you have a very valuable car, you should definitely take that insurance out.
I see. Okay. Speaking about additional coverage for natural disasters, can you tell us about some of the lessons that you've actually learned from some of the natural disasters that have happened in Malaysia recently?
Sure. I think the Penang one was a classic point, because when we looked at it, how many people actually had special perils cover to cover their cars, it was really low. So I think there was a few hundred or 100 or plus cars completely gone, and then it was less than a handful that actually had the insurance. And flood nowadays, it can come very quickly, because when we get storms, it is more intense rain in a very short space of time. So the water's got nowhere to go, and then with all the development, it typically pools much faster, can't drain away. So where people might have parked their cars in the street before and it was perfectly fine, suddenly now it's gone, right? And in a flood, a lot of times the car cannot be recovered. So if you've taken a loan to buy the car, you're still having to pay it, and you don't have a car. I mean, that's a big impact, right? So people need to understand, you are just throwing away a lot of money. So, pay a bit more. Yes, it's of course a bit more expensive to get that. But if you ask me, our cars are typically around 100,000 ringgit, on around that. That's a bit of money. How happy are people to give that away? It's very painful.
So you should be able to pay the additional coverage, especially if you live in prone areas. Yeah,
if you're prone areas, like I said, it is. There's a no-brainer, right? Why wouldn't you do it? I think the thing is, people always thought before, it never flooded here.
It's never going to happen to me.
Yeah, and look, it happened twice last year, right?
Okay. What happens if, in some cases, some consumers would want to dispute the claim amount? Can they actually do that, and who can they talk to?
They can. So ideally, first case is go back to the insurance company, write your complaints. We all have complaints departments, and we look at that. If you're really not satisfied, there is the OFS, Ombudsman for Financial Services, set up by Bank Negara. So they deal with all disputes up to 200,000 ringgit. That's a very good system. You write in, they have a process, and they will work with us to try and get it settled. Otherwise, if it's above 200,000 ringgit, you obviously need to go through the normal courts.
So if there was one tip that you would give to our viewers, what would it be?
Make sure you read your policy. Make sure when you choose what you're buying, don't necessarily go for the cheapest, because there are many factors involved in why the price is what it is. And service is also important, right? You want to make sure you have a insurance company that will service you quickly, so that you can get your car back as soon as possible.
Awesome. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, now that you know how your driving behavior will affect your motor insurance premium, after the break, we'll be sharing with you tips on how you can save fuel by changing the way you drive. Stay with us to find out more. Malaysians are finding ways to cut down on petrol expenses. Now, we spoke to Conway Luen, an editor from Evil Malaysia, a car review website, to give you some tips on how to keep your car running efficiently by saving your fuel, time, and hard-earned money.
Con spends a lot of time reviewing cars, so we asked him what are the fuel-saving tips that actually work. One of the first things drivers can do is to leave behind any additional weight in the car. Con also says that by leaving small dead weight items like shoes, clothes, and office files in your car, this will cause your car to use more fuel. We also asked him about driving habits. Is it true that hard acceleration and other bad driving habits contribute to higher fuel consumption? This is what he had to say.
Well, first, it all starts with your driving style, and the first and most important tip that I can give you will be to drive smoothly. So you don't abruptly step on the accelerator, you do not abruptly step on your brake pedal. Try as much as possible to look forward and anticipate the traffic conditions ahead. So, for example, if you see further ahead, cars are already slowing down, then you ease off a bit earlier, then you do not have to use so much of your brakes, and you do not have to waste the momentum that you have built up.
For first-time drivers, many do not know when to use the highest gear. In the past, manual cars were more efficient compared to automatics, but with newer transmission technologies, they've made some automatics more efficient than manuals. Basic autos with 4 or 5 gears are still not as efficient, but with newer and more advanced auto gearboxes with 7 to 8 gears, this will give you more fuel saving than a manual transmission. This makes your car run efficiently and gives a smoother ride.
Well, basically, you use your highest gear when based on your current driving conditions. Okay, so the logic behind this is very simple. Your fuel consumption, right? Okay, maximizing your fuel consumption is about covering the most distance, the longest distance, with the least amount of fuel. Okay, so when you use a high gear, okay, what happens is that you are each engine revolution, okay, like your RPM, okay, is translating to more speed. So, for example, at a certain gear, okay, like say at your car's 5th gear, 100 kilometers per hour is 2,500 RPM versus 4th gear is probably 3,500 to 4,000 RPM. So in this kind of scenario, okay, 4th gear, 5th gear, you are both doing the same speed, but you are using less engine RPM, and consequently you are using less fuel.
There are a variety of fuel types to choose from, such as RON95, RON97, Euro 4 diesel, and many more. Research octane number, or known as RON, is a synonym known to all vehicle users. In Malaysia, we have RON95, 97, and even 100. RON is used to measure fuel knocking resistance in spark ignition internal combustion engines.
Okay, now first misconception is, right, RON97 does not necessarily mean a better fuel than RON95, okay? But what it does mean is that RON97 has a higher energy content inside the fuel, okay? And it's also less prone to this phenomenon called detonation, okay? So detonation is something that wears down your engine pretty fast. So high-performance engines, okay, tend to require RON97 and upwards. Most cars in the market okay to run with RON95, but for normal cars, right, as the cars age and carbon builds up inside the cylinders, the engine combustion chamber, that is when you may actually need RON97 to counter the potential knocking.
A majority of drivers think that driving with a blinking fuel indicator means it's safer to drive for a certain kilometer. In fact, how far you can go depends on a few things: car fuel tank size, weight of your car, and the terrain that you're driving on.
It really depends from car to car one, okay? So like right now here, I'm driving a Wajah based on my personal experience with this car, when the fuel light comes on, right, I still have about 10 liters of fuel left in the tank. I've also experienced before where another car, I can't remember what car, the fuel light came on, right, within 10 kilometers the car just ran out of fuel. So it really varies from car to car, and the tip for the consumer is when you buy your car, right, okay, read the spec sheet, find out how big is your fuel tank and keep that figure in mind. So some cars, 35 liters, 45 liters, 50 liters and all that. So every time when you refuel your car, okay, I have this practice of refueling it, full tank, so I know how much fuel exactly goes into the fuel tank.
Fuel prices at the pump in Malaysia are now decided weekly with a float system using the automatic pricing mechanism, or APM. It's a complex system that uses the prices of processed fuel internationally and considers other costs to decide the weekly price. So it does not necessarily correspond to the changes in the price per barrel of oil in the international market. While consumers may have no control over the price of fuel, what we can control is our driving habits to save fuel.
Now, we hope the interviews today have opened your eyes about how driving behaviors can actually affect your pocket. Now, the more dangerous of a driver you are, the more you're going to be paying in terms of insurance premiums. So if you think that driving is too stressful, well, there's always public transport. You'll save money on fuel and avoid motor insurance premiums. Now, if you want to watch the interviews from today's episode or share it with your friends, go to our Facebook page, Ringgit Sense TV3. I'm Azaria Tagaya. Spend wisely, and I'll be back next week with more personal finance tips.